Hello, everybody. We're here today to talk about how we got into Brandon Sanderson's class. It is worth noting that there's actually two different types of classes. There's the general lecture class, which anyone can attend, which is incredibly useful. Those are the ones that are up on YouTube. And then each year, there's a 15-person workshop class where those 15 people are divided into 3 groups of 5. And then each week, Brandon circles around and gives feedback to them, or at least that was the structure when we did it in 2018. I imagine the structure that was used each time. 4 of us who are on this recording right now were in for the same year, but Jonah was actually in the year prior to us. So we thought we'd kick off with Jonah. Jonah would talk about the initial experience, and then we go from there.
Yeah, so I think of it both as bragging rights and sad that I was in the year before you guys because, haha, I got in before you. I am the big cheese, but also, like, you guys all have your groups still, and you were all friends before I met you. And meanwhile, my writing group, I basically didn't hear from them as soon as the class ended. But yeah, so I got in. I believe it was winter of 2017 was the class that I got into. And the fun thing about that is that there was actually a post on Brandon's website giving some statistics about the submission process for that year. So I'm just going to rattle off one or two of the important ones. So the year that I was accepted into the 15 student workshop class, there were 72 total submissions for that workshop class, not 72 that got past the first round or something, 72 total, and 2 of those were immediately rejected for being late. And of those submissions, 45 of them were from seniors, a couple of them were from grad students, there were 10 juniors, 1 freshman, and then 7 sophomores, of which I was one. So this was not the first time that I had tried applying to Brandon's class. I had been a freshman when I applied the first time. I was a very cocky freshman who thought that he was totally ready to get into Brandon's class, and it was a very helpful but rude awakening when I got that rejection. And what's interesting is that I definitely think of my being able to get in. I can pinpoint the exact thing that I can kind of say was the thing that got me through, and it's that in the August before I submitted my sophomore year and got into that class, there was like a 1-week period, which I really can't describe any way else than saying I got serious about writing. Like, it wasn't that I was just kind of dirtling around with writing before that, but I sat down, took a work in progress that I had tried to redo 3 times before, sat down, got rid of everything, and just wrote it over from scratch. And that was the thing that I stuck into the application that got me in. And so, like, my experience was definitely one of, I don't want to say it's completely universal in that everyone, when they get a rejection from Brandon's class, probably goes back and tries to figure out what they could do better. But for me, it was definitely one single epiphany moment that really pushed me into the kind of writing quality that I think Brandon was going for. And I don't know how universal that kind of epiphany moment is compared to just continued building of your craft. So, but yeah, that was my experience. Got in on the second attempt, which I was definitely very fortunate too, because good heavens, getting in as a sophomore, I've never really thought about how crazy that is, but that's how I did it. It didn't feel particularly momentous when I submitted the application, but hey, it worked.
And I got in as a junior the year after Jonah, winter semester 2018. At BYU, winter semester is a semester running from January to April. And on the application, I put that I had completed 9 novels, and the submission that I sent as my writing sample was polished. So I know that I applied with a strong application. And for those of you who might be applying from BYU, it will list a prerequisite class for Brandon's class called English 218. You don't actually need to take that. You will get an ad code if you get accepted into the class. And it was a really awesome experience. And a little bit about the format of Brandon's class is, so there's, as Jeff said, a lecture class that's taught in a big auditorium. Anybody at all can take that class. And then there's this section we were in with only 15 people accepted per year. I took the lecture class 2 times before as a freshman and a sophomore to make sure I got to know Brandon a little bit. I would make sure to sit in the front row of the class and participate fully, be engaged. I want to make sure I got the maximum amount of learning I could get beforehand before I went through with that application process.
Yeah, just a quick aside from the statistics. Erica wrote 9. I wrote 2 when I was accepted, and apparently the most prolific author from my year wrote 16. So it's really not a matter of quantity with how many novels you write. It's definitely about the quality.
I had only written one, and I had written it like 2 or 3 times by that point. Rebellion, the Departure. I'd just been writing that over and over since high school. Which oftentimes, I mean, Erica freaking over here writing 9. Yeah, wild. Also, it probably would have been smart for me to think of going to the lecture class beforehand. I did not. To the best of my knowledge, I did nothing with the class until I applied as a junior and for whatever reason got in. Which to this day I still think about as just absolutely insane, because I had other friends that felt far more qualified than I was to get into the class, but I got into the class. I'm very grateful that I did, because around the time that I did, I had been thinking about quitting writing just altogether. I think I had just finished my 3rd go through of Rebellion, the Departure, and I was about to start on the 4th, and I was so tired of the process that I was really just quite ready to be done with it. And I applied to the class because I'd talked about getting into the class ever since I had started studying at BYU. It was a big part of the reason why I went to that particular university. And I hadn't been entirely sure if I'd get in, but I did. And yeah, that was a big push for me.
So my experience was a little different than these folks. I don't know if the folks watching can tell, but I'm a little bit older than those who have spoken so far. Just a little. I was not a traditional student. I was actually working at BYU as a visiting professor of psychology. Had finished my PhD a few years before, and that was my first big job. And had been a fan of Brandon's for a long time, but wasn't even aware of the existence of the class until that class of 2018. At that point, I had been serious about writing for a couple of years, I believe. I had one completed manuscript under my belt and a couple of partials, and was not sure at all if I would get in. That year of 2018, they actually capped the submissions, stopped accepting submissions after 65 people had put their applications in, and it has since changed even more than that, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But I made sure that I was in right as soon as those submissions opened. I think I put it in at like 12:05 a.m. the day that it came open, and wanted to make sure that I got my chance. Being entirely unsure whether I would get in or not, I felt like my writing was good, but I think everybody does. And so I was really grateful to be able to be a part of that smaller course.
So I was in a slightly different boat, more similar to Cameron, in that Cameron and I are the same age. So, I was a non-traditional student coming in, but I was also not at BYU. I wasn't even in Utah. So for those who don't know, BYU is a school located in Utah. In the Provo area, right? And I had to go through some things in order to be able to attend. And it was actually a very nice process, all things considered. I had found out about Brandon, obviously through his writing, and then doing writing of my own, I found out about his YouTube videos for the class he taught. And I always thought like, oh, it'd be so cool, if I could go take the class. And that was a couple years before I ended up applying. I had been writing since college on and off, when I wrote like a novel in my like early to mid 20s. But then much like Mason, I just been kind of like rewriting the same thing over and over, a couple of shorts here and there. So I really wanted to use a class to be a kick in the pants and move forward. So I was like, I think I could do this. Now I'm just giving a little bit of backstory here because I know there might be some people out there who want to go to BYU for a semester. And I will say it is tricky. I had to get my job in a particular place where that was going to work. I was living in a super small town, so rent was cheap. My wife was sweet enough to like let me go for a semester and just like, go take a class. So I mean, it took a lot of planning to make work, but I'm incredibly grateful that I did. So the one is just the planning life stuff, right? But in terms of the actual things I had to do beyond submitting and getting, accepted, which I was very grateful to get accepted, is I had to go to an LDS church and talk with someone there about like who I was and what the church was like and what was expected of me. I definitely had to agree not to do certain things. I had to like shave, no coffee, I think it is. There's a no swearing. There's a handful of different drinking, of course, a handful of different things that I had, pledged that I would not be doing during my time there, which I did, seemed like a good exchange. And so they were very kind and nice to me and said, I'd like you to know more about us. I think you'd benefit from learning more about us through doing this program. I was like, well, thank you. That's great. And so the process wasn't that bad. And everyone I called at BYU was super friendly and nice and helped me figure out what I was supposed to register for and get signed up, as a non-traditional student. And honestly, considering what you're getting for going there, the cost of a class like is not super expensive, even for coming in as like this, outside person who's not taking anything else there. You're really just going in to take the lecture and then take the 15-person class. So there is a cost associated with it, of course, but it's not, wildly expensive, again, for the quality. Last but not least, housing is, of course, tricky, but there are some really nice Facebook groups that were very, again, kind. I have to tell the story of when I, flew into Salt Lake City, took a train down to Provo, which, by the way, is really easy to do. Very simple to get from the airport of Salt Lake City to Provo. You don't need a car or anything. But the person that I was renting a house from, it was like a college house, and there were a handful of like, guys not around my age or, all younger. But the person that I was renting from was an older gentleman. He and his wife picked me up at the train station and then took me out to dinner. And I was like, thank you. He's like, yeah, I just want to get you acclimated. I just want to make sure you're all right. I was already just bowled over that he was picking me up as opposed to me like, taking an Uber or whatever, or walking to where the house was. So I was incredibly impressed by the community of people. I ended up meeting my roommate my very first night there. He's like, you probably need to go to Walmart to get some groceries, right? He like took me and I did a whole grocery run. So I don't want to say, the people were wonderful because that's a massive generalization, but everybody I met was wonderful, super nice, super accommodating. And I was incredibly impressed because I am not of the Mormon faith. And I was very much just accepted and helped out. And it was one of the best experiences of my life, hand down, not just because of that, but also because of what I got out of it. Brandon, early on in lecture says, the most important thing you're going to get from this is your writing group. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel he taught us some very, very helpful things, but having this writing group over the past 4 years has been amazing. So I know my explanation was a little bit longer there, but that's some information if you are a non-traditional student about that it is absolutely possible. If anyone wants to see what I submitted with, it's actually up on my website and I'll link it in the description so you can see like what story was sent in, just to get a sense of, what are people applying with. And I was very, very fortunate to get in, very happy that I got to.
I love how
Just a second.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just a second what Jeff said. Thank you, Cameron. So yes, we benefited tremendously from being in Brandon's class. As a final, we submitted a writing sample and he gave us very personalized feedback on that. And just getting the feedback day to day when we were attending class. By the way attendance works is it's only taught on Thursdays in the evening. So if you have a work schedule or other classes, that's how you should be working around it. It's a Thursday evening class, only taught winter semester, January to April. But the big thing that I got out of that class wasn't that for a couple of weeks in 2018, I got to work with Brandon Sanderson, but it's that I got to work with these guys who are handpicked and then polished in this class, and we're still meeting 4 years later. And another thing is, so when we were in this class originally, there's 15 of us. We were broken up into 3 teams of 5. None of these people that I'm recording this video with right now were on my team of 5. Like we networked. We would like stay after class. Jeff would organize these little get-togethers. Our class officially ended like 8. I would stay until 9 p.m. I get there like an hour early. Sometimes I would spend like 5 hours in class when it was only a 3-hour class. And one night I stayed up till 4 a.m. writing after. So did nothing between 4 p.m. and 4 a.m. but write books and be in class with all my writing friends. But the big good that I got out of that class is I have this writing group. We're trained, we're polished, and we're still working together years later because we were highly motivated enough to connect with each other and keep it going on all these years later. So if you get into the class, that's what you have to look forward to.
Anybody who is interested in, because this is a thing that Brandon still does and hopefully will do for the near future at least. Unsurprisingly, as he has gotten more popular, the number of applications has exploded. And so at this point, you have to actually submit into a lottery system and get picked in order to even get your work reviewed to see whether or not you can get into the class. I am so glad that I missed that because I hate that. I understand why they're doing it. He has a small team of folks that is responsible for reviewing these manuscripts, and they're trying to run a business, and he just does this out of the goodness of his heart. So it's not surprising that they have to do it this way. But do be aware that you can be the best writer in the whole world and be looking to get into that class. And depending on the luck of the draw, you may not even get the opportunity. And so you may have to apply for several years before you get the chance.
Well, but more importantly, and this is kind of illustrated by my ears, the fact that this is a class. Like, this isn't just a purely networking thing that you do once you've established yourself. Like in that article that I mentioned, another one of the important things that was mentioned was we're not looking for people whose writing is already as perfect as it can be. Like, we're not looking for people who are already at Brandon's level. We're looking at people who are at a level just good enough for Brandon to be able to help constructively. Like, when I got in, I wasn't even writing historical fantasy yet. And like, that's my passion now. I got my first idea for historical fantasy halfway through that class. So don't ever feel like you have to be the greatest writer in the world to even start thinking about submitting. Just if you think that your writing is in a good enough place, it does not have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be particularly good or deep, because mine was absolutely not when I was accepted. It just has to be of a quality enough that Brandon is able to help with things beyond the basics. And that's what's really important through all of our stories, is that we weren't necessarily in our peak of our writing ability, but we were good enough that he could help us. Like, we were good enough that the class would be helpful as opposed to overwhelming.
Yeah, and really quick, bouncing off of that as well, the writing group that we've got is definitely the best product of our class, right? But also, as Jonah mentioned earlier, right, like, he has not spoken with the vast majority of the individuals within his particular class, within his particular year, right? So I think it's definitely possible that you can go into this class and get precisely what we have had, but I don't think that you should go in and expect it. If what you are looking for is this, make this happen. I think a large part of why our writing group is what it is because while we were in the class, Jeff was very proactive in kind of bringing groups together. And Jeff may deflect that or whatever, but I think that is like a very focal aspect. And so if you go into this just expecting to find the right people, to find the right group, and for it all to work out, it is very possible that you will be disappointed. So if that is what you want, work really hard at it. And hopefully the people of your year are the type of people that will facilitate that type of thing. Even if that doesn't happen though, like, you get pushed a lot in this class, you write a lot in this class, and also Brandon Sanderson reads your stuff in this class, which, like, I don't know of another situation where I could have Brandon Sanderson reading my writing, right? So let's certainly not downplay how big that is. His kind words about the stuff that I was working on, this class did so much to kind of encourage me and bring me from that place where I was at, where I was like, maybe I just shouldn't do this. And instead bring me to a place where I was like, I'm definitely going to do this. basically for as long as I live. So, so it's big. It's a very impactful experience.
I couldn't agree more, Mason. There's just so much good to be had from the class, and I feel we're all so fortunate to still be here today doing this. It's great. Well, that's us, everybody, about the class. If you have any follow-up questions for us, we'll do our best to answer them in the comments. But as always, good luck with your writing, and we hope this has been helpful and even inspirational. We'll see you next time, Blackheads.